A pleasant day to everyone. I am Charmaine Balbas Macapagal, your reporter for today, under the emerging trends in ICT and challenges to educational planning. Our discussion mainly focus on the challenges to educational planners dealing with ICT. The ICT revolution offers new intrinsic opportunities. It dramatically changes what can be learned and by whom, as well as what can be produced and provided by whom. These potential changes, however, pose many new challenges for educational planners. For us to understand what are these challenges, it is divided into two broad types: those that pertain to equity and those that pertain to quality. But unless the educational planners respond to these changes and challenges with commensurate speed, they will become, so to speak, technologically challenged. Let us first define equity. It is justice according to natural law or rights, specifically freedom from bias or favoritism. This raises the broader question of equity within countries as well as between countries, particularly between industrialized and developing world. Although in many Western countries, most households have personal computers linked to the internet. However, considerable differences remain along regional and class lines. Several studies document that boys are more active than girls in using the new technical tools. And though schools also are increasingly well-equipped and connected, standards vary within countries with educational level and type. The same applies to teacher training skills. Moreover, it is true that millions of personal computers are sold every year, and millions gain access to the internet. For example, in Norway, more than half the population is connected to the web, and some 80% have mobile phones. Yet, half of the world's population has yet to make their first phone call. There are as many telephones in Tokyo or Manhattan as in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. Malaysia is different from Madagascar. Shanghai is very different from its hinterlands. In many countries, practically all the telephones are found in the capital. Bissau has more than 95% of the telephone lines in Guinea-Bissau, and Freetown has more than 85% of the lines in Sierra Leone. Majority of the villages in many developing countries lack electric power, let alone internet connectivity. Elsewhere, there had been a gradual deterioration of public services. Access is poor, functioning is irregular, prices are high, and the service is scanty. The pressing problem for educational planners is how to reach within a reasonable time the needs of the majority who are poor, uneducated, and those who live in rural areas, how to fund, implement, and maintain the educational part of ICT networks. This question is more pressing because most of the major international teleoperators do not include remote areas in their business plans. The bitter fact is this: what happens in the country does not depend on the state of the art, but on the state of its economy, its system of law, the functioning of its institutions, and the workings of its civil society. Also, let us not forget that education is equals to finance, public funds to be spent and private demand to be targeted. Hence, ICT, and particularly the Internet, is not only an arena for altruism and experiments, but also for business, entrepreneurship, and sometimes exploitation. In other words, education is increasingly becoming a market, and a global one at that. In a market, there are customers and producers, and access to the production side of this market is even less equitable than access to its usage side. Some nations also actively promote programs for foreigners by distance education via the Internet. Australia is a prominent example where services from its educational institutions have grown in a whole export industry. This development provides further opportunities for students. It releases education from the natural control, and it makes the market a stronger force in the globalization of education. On the other hand, planners and officials in developing or smaller countries may face an expanding international market with powerful actors and many new ventures about which they have imperfect knowledge, exercise scant control, and have few possibilities for participation. The issue of equity pertaining to ICT must be addressed along two dimensions: equitable access of students as consumers, where the poorer peoples and nations are put at a disadvantage, and equitable provision of content, where the poor are even worse off. Ideally, one wishes for equal opportunities to participate, but access for different actors, both as users and producers, is weighted by their resources. Hence, initial differences are often reproduced, reinforced, and even magnified. A challenge, therefore, continues to face planners of education how to define the problem and provide assistance for development. After our discussion of the challenges that pertains to equity, let us now proceed to the challenges that pertain to quality. Let us first define what quality is. It is the standard of something as measured against other things of a similar kind, the degree of excellence of something. As ICT is rapidly becoming an integral part of the social environment, and as our jobs are being transformed rapidly into tapping on keyboards and looking at screens, traditional literacy is no longer sufficient. What could be called illiteracy becomes imperative. Illiteracy is learning to work a PC, and surfing the internet is becoming crucial for functioning in the workplace, for effective citizenship, for entertainment, and for personal growth. With the rapid change in technology, training cannot be a one-shot affair. We must be updated continuously to stay abreast of developments. The planning and designing educational systems so that they familiarize students with a technology that is being modified and evolving continuously is not just an intellectual challenge, it is also an economic one. The problem about quality is exacerbated by the fact that many vendors of new technologies are sometimes more pushers than providers, promoting solutions that have a short useful life or little compatibility with what emerged as industry standards. The history of information technology is not just a history of innovation, but also a history of misguided investments. This situation applies to hardware as well as to learning packages and software that promise more than is delivered. What is bought is often expensive and inappropriate, resulting in costly mistakes not just in economic terms, but in terms of time stolen from students who would have been better off using more proven methods of learning. As Robert Merton said, the fallacy of the latest word, that sometimes new solutions are pushed by politicians and ministers as well. They feel they need to prove they are modern by going for gadgets, but they are out of the office when the negative results are in. Moreover, it takes time to discover what the potential of ICT in education can best be tapped. And as technology itself is changing, final solutions will continue to evade us. This is not all. The learning process also may be skewed in unfortunate directions. Much is made of the fact that ICT has become increasingly interactive. Learning programs can be tailored to each student, learning at his or her own pace, and being introduced to more challenging tasks as learning proceeds. As we can see in the images presented, it is now becoming a competition of formal education turning into a virtual world. The stream of innovations and findings more than ever requires fundamental knowledge. Without familiarity with such systems of reference, the explosion of knowledge leads only to more confusion. Finally, one may ask, is ICT assisted education better or worse than traditional education? ICT does not suit all students, all subjects, or all phases of learning equally well. Much depends on how ICT assisted learning is done, and as in traditional teaching, there are no fast formulas. Discovering and developing the potential of ICT will surely take time, and what we find may not be valid for all time because the context surely will change. Technology in itself is not a panacea. Uploading web content in different subjects does not in itself result in quality teaching or effective use. Teachers have to be trained and need to feel knowledgeable and skilled. Not always easy in an environment where young students are often quicker than their teachers to learn new technologies. The challenge for educational planners are first to have consider what a well-rounded education is. The whole point of education as a common human enterprise is that no student can bring out his or her potential if left to the student's own haphazard personal search. Students have to be led out, educated in the original sense of the word. Educational planners can focus no longer just on how to secure implementation. They need to arrange for continuous experimentation and innovation to learn by doing in an ever-changing environment where even what is being learned and done is changing. To end our discussion, let us have our conclusion. There are optimistic theories about development, yet the digital divide will be with us for years to come, and the poor will remain in the worst position for a long time, even under the most ambitious programs. Perhaps the greatest divide is between the gains we would all reap if all of us could use the potential of the new technologies to develop our talents in the ways that could benefit us all, and the willingness of those of us who are in the rich parts of the world to enable, empower, and involve all those who are now poor at the margins and not connected. This ends our discussion, and let us not forget, we don't grow when things are easy. We grow when we face challenges. Thank you.